Dear beautiful souls, welcome to Her True Stories. Ladies, before we dive into today's powerful story, I need to tell you something important. If you've ever felt like people see you as just a grieving widow or just an older woman who doesn't understand business, this story is for you. Today's protagonist, Priscilla Rodriguez, discovers that underestimating a woman's strength is the biggest mistake anyone can make. But here's what I want you to remember as we begin. Your age is not your weakness. It's your wisdom. Your experience is not outdated. It's invaluable. And your instincts? They're sharper than any young person's schemes. If you're ready to stop letting others define your worth and start reclaiming your power, grab our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, from the link in the description. This book has helped thousands of women just like you, and just like Priscilla, discover that their strongest chapters are still being written. Now, let's see how one woman turned her greatest betrayal into her most powerful victory. My name is Priscilla Rodriguez, and at 59 years old, I thought I knew everything about loss. I was wrong. The morning sun painted the chapel walls gold as I clutched my sister Maria's rosary, the beads still warm from her hands just 3 days ago. The funeral service had been simple. Maria would have wanted it that way. She was never one for grand gestures, preferring to let her actions speak louder than words. Outside, 23 ranch hands stood in perfect formation, their worn Stetsons held against their chests. These men had worked the Whitmore Ranch for decades, some since before I married David Rodriguez and moved to Austin. They knew Maria better than I did in many ways, and their silent tribute said more than any eulogy could. The chapel doors creaked open, and Arturo Mendez stepped inside. My sister's estate attorney was a man of precise movements and careful words. Exactly the kind of person Maria trusted with her deepest secrets. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said softly, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "When you're ready, we should discuss Maria's final wishes." I nodded, smoothing my black dress and touching the pearl necklace at my throat, a gift from Maria on my 40th birthday. "I'm ready." The ranch office still smelled like Maria's lavender perfume and strong coffee. Her massive oak desk dominated the room, covered with ledgers that tracked every head of cattle, every acre of grass, every dollar spent and earned. Maria had run this operation like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, because that's essentially what she was. Arturo opened his leather briefcase with the same reverence one might use for sacred texts. "Your sister was very specific about her intentions, Priscilla. She updated her 6 months ago, after her cancer diagnosis." My throat tightened. Maria had hidden her illness from me until the very end, claiming she didn't want to worry me. Stubborn, proud Maria, protecting everyone else while carrying her burdens alone. "The Whitmore Ranch, all 12,000 acres, passes to you," Arturo continued, sliding documents across the desk. "Along with 1,000 head of prime Black Angus cattle, valued at approximately $2.8 million. I stared at the papers, the legal language swimming before my eyes. This ranch had been in Maria's late husband's family for 4 generations. She'd married into it, then built it into an empire through sheer determination and business acumen. "There's more," Arturo said gently. "Your sister also leaves you her personal accounts, totaling $22 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. $22 million. More money than I'd ever imagined possessing. More responsibility than I'd ever wanted." "She left a personal letter as well," Arturo said, handing me an envelope with my name written in Maria's careful script. "She asked that you read it privately." My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. Maria always was theatrical about important things. Inside, her handwriting filled 2 pages of her personal stationery. "My dearest Priscilla, if you're reading this, I've finally lost my battle with this wicked disease. Don't you dare cry for me. I lived exactly the life I wanted on my own terms. I'm leaving you the ranch because you understand what I learned too late. Stewardship is love, not appetite. This land, these cattle, this legacy, they're not possessions to be consumed. They're responsibilities to be cherished. I know you're thinking you don't know enough about ranching to handle this. You're wrong. You have something more valuable than knowledge. You have integrity. The rest you'll learn. There's one more thing, and this is important. Your son Marcus has been calling here for months, asking questions about my health, my finances, my plans. He hasn't spoken to you in 15 years, but he's been very interested in my affairs lately. Trust your instincts about him, sister. Trust what you already know. The ranch will teach you everything else. All my love, Maria. I folded the letter carefully, my mind reeling. Marcus. My 34-year-old son who'd walked out of my life after I refused to enable his gambling addiction one too many times. The son who'd blamed me for his father's death, as if David's heart attack had been my fault somehow. Mrs. Rodriguez? Arturo's voice pulled me back to the present. There are operational matters we need to discuss. The ranch employs 23 full-time workers, has contracts with 7 major buyers, and maintains breeding programs that book out 2 years in advance. I looked out the window at the vast expanse of Texas prairie, dotted with black cattle that looked like pepper scattered across golden cloth. A windmill turned lazily in the distance, its blades catching the afternoon light. What about the foreman? Hank, isn't it? Hank Albright. He's been with the ranch 32 years. Absolutely loyal to your sister's vision and methods. Arturo paused, studying my face. He's also been asking questions about succession plans. Something in his tone made me look at him sharply. What kind of questions? Whether you plan to keep the current management structure. Whether you might bring in outside help. Outside help. The euphemism hung between us like a loaded gun. After Arturo left, I walked the property alone. The cattle watched me with mild curiosity as I passed, their ear tags glinting in the late afternoon sun. Each tag represented thousands of dollars, careful breeding decisions, veterinary records, and Maria's meticulous attention to detail. I found myself at the windmill Maria had called Widow's Gate in her letters. It was the highest point on the ranch, offering a panoramic view of everything Maria had built. The wind here never stopped, turning the blades with hypnotic persistence. I promise, I whispered to the wind, to Maria's memory, to myself. I won't let anyone destroy what you've built. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, when I saw the dust cloud on the main road. A pickup truck moving fast toward the ranch house. I shielded my eyes against the dying light, watching as the vehicle turned into our driveway. It stopped near the front porch, engine ticking in the sudden silence. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, lean, wearing expensive boots and a hat that had never seen a day's real work. Even in silhouette, I knew that arrogant stance, that way of taking up space like he owned whatever ground he stood on. My heart clenched with 15 years of buried pain and disappointed love. Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the evening air. "Mama, it's me." I stood perfectly still by the windmill, watching my son walk toward the house where he'd been born, where he'd taken his first steps, where he'd broken my heart into pieces too small to count. The wind kept turning the blades, and I made my second promise of the day. Whatever Marcus wanted, whatever game he was playing, I would not let him consume Maria's legacy the way addiction had consumed his father's life. Some hungers are never satisfied, no matter how much you feed them. I made Marcus wait. For 30 minutes, I stood at that windmill, watching him pace the front porch like a caged animal. He knocked twice, called my name several times, then sat in one of Maria's rocking chairs as if he belonged there. When I finally walked down from Widow's Gate, the porch light was on, and Marcus had helped himself to sweet tea from the pitcher Rosa Delgado, our assistant foreman, always kept in the refrigerator. He looked good, too good for a man who'd spent years running from his demons. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his clothes expensive, his smile practiced. "Mama," he said, standing as I climbed the porch steps. "You look beautiful." "I'm so sorry about Aunt Maria." I studied his face, searching for genuine grief and finding only calculation. "Thank you. I know we haven't talked in a long time," he continued, settling back into the rocking chair as if we'd never been estranged. "But family is family, especially during times like this." I poured myself tea from the pitcher, noting that he'd taken it upon himself to make himself at home. "How did you know Maria died?" "I don't recall putting your name on any notification list." His smile flickered for just a moment. "Word gets around. Small communities, you know how it is." I didn't point out that Marcus had been living in Dallas for the past 5 years, hardly a small community, and certainly not one where West Texas ranch news traveled quickly. Instead, I settled into Maria's favorite chair and waited. "The thing is, Mama," Marcus said, leaning forward with that earnest expression I remembered from his childhood, back when he'd use it to explain broken windows or missing homework. "You're in a difficult situation here. This ranch, all these cattle, the business operations, it's a lot for anyone to handle alone." "Is it?" "Of course it is. You're 59 years old. You've been living in the city for decades. You don't know the first thing about running a cattle operation." His voice carried a patronizing edge that made my jaw clench. "But that's where I come in." I sipped my tea and watched a barn cat stalk something in the shadows. "Where you come in how, exactly?" "I want to help. I want to be the man in this situation, take care of you the way Dad would have wanted." Marcus stood up, pacing to the porch rail with theatrical energy. "I've got experience now, Mama. I understand business, I understand money, I understand how to make things grow." The barn cat pounced, catching whatever it had been hunting. Natural predator behavior, patient, focused, efficient. "What kind of business experience?" I asked. "Investment consulting. Asset management. I help people maximize their portfolios, turn their money into more money." He turned back to me, eyes bright with what he probably thought was infectious enthusiasm. "I could do the same thing here. Modernize operations, maximize efficiency, really make this place profitable." I thought of Maria's ledgers, with their meticulous records of profit and loss going back 30 years. The ranch had been profitable every single year except 2008, and even then she'd managed to break even when half the ranchers in Texas went bankrupt. "The ranch is already profitable, Marcus." Sure, but think bigger. Think about real money, serious money. With the right management, the right vision, we could double, maybe triple the returns on this operation. He pulled out his phone, showing me what looked like financial projections. "I've been doing some research, running some numbers. The beef market is exploding right now, especially for premium grass-fed operations like this. We're sitting on a gold mine, Mama." There was that word again. "We." "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I haven't made any decisions about how to manage the ranch yet." Marcus sat back down, reaching over to pat my hand with what was probably meant to be reassurance, but felt like condescension. "Of course not. You've got a lot on your plate right now, dealing with grief and all the legal stuff. That's exactly why you need someone you can trust to handle the business side of things." Someone you can trust. The irony was breathtaking. The vendors, the buyers, the bank, they all need to know there's a man in charge, he continued. "No offense, Mama, but this is still Texas. These old boys respond to strength, to authority. They need to see someone who can make the tough decisions and follow through." I thought of Maria, who'd commanded respect from every rancher, banker, and cattle buyer from El Paso to Houston. who never needed to raise her voice or pound her fist to get what she wanted because her word was better than any contract. Where have you been living, Marcus? What have you been doing for work? Dallas, mostly. Some traveling for business. Like I said, investment consulting. He waved his hand vaguely. The important thing is that I'm here now when you need me most. The important thing. I noticed he hadn't actually answered my question. A movement in the shadows caught my eye. Rosa Delgado was walking back from the cattle barn, probably finishing her evening rounds. She glanced toward the porch, and even in the dim light, I could see her frown when she spotted Marcus. I think we should take this one step at a time, I said. I'm still learning about the operation, still meeting with lawyers and accountants. There's a lot to process. Marcus nodded eagerly. Absolutely. But while you're processing, the business has to keep running. Cattle need to be fed, buyers need to be contacted, decisions need to be made. I could handle all of that for you. Take the pressure off so you can focus on healing. Focus on healing. As if grief were an injury that would render me incompetent. I'll think about it, I said, standing up. It's been a long day. Of course, of course. You get your rest. Marcus did too, and for a moment I thought he was going to hug me. Instead, he just nodded. I'm staying at the motel in town for now, but I'm flexible. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. After he left, I sat on the porch for another hour, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. Rosa appeared at the bottom of the porch steps, her face troubled. Mrs. Rodriguez? I hope you don't mind me asking, but was that your son? She nodded slowly. He was here about 3 weeks ago, asking questions about Miss Maria's condition. Wanted to know about the cattle inventory, the bank accounts, the will. My blood chilled. 3 weeks ago? Maria was still alive 3 weeks ago. Yes, ma'am. She was in town getting chemotherapy, and he came by when the property was mostly empty. Spent a lot of time in the office, taking pictures with his phone. Taking pictures. Of what, exactly? Did you tell Maria? Rosa shook her head. Miss Maria was so sick then, and she was trying so hard to stay strong. I didn't want to add to her worries. But I did change the locks on the office and the safe. She pulled a key from her pocket. Miss Maria asked me to give this to you when she passed. Said you'd know what to do with it. The key was warm from Rosa's hand and heavier than it looked. The kind of key that opened something important. Rosa, what did you think of my son's questions? She was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. Mrs. Rodriguez, in my experience, people who count what they haven't earned usually have plans for what they haven't been given. That night, I lay in Maria's guest room. She'd insisted I stay at the ranch house rather than drive back to town, and stared at the ceiling. Through the window, I could see the windmill at Widow's Gate, its blades turning endlessly in the night wind. Marcus had been here 3 weeks ago, taking pictures, asking questions, making plans. While Maria fought for her life, while I grieved in ignorance, my son had been calculating the value of her death. Some hungers are never satisfied, Maria's letter had warned. And some predators are patient enough to wait for their prey to weaken before they strike. But this prey wasn't as weak as she appeared. I was just getting started. The next morning brought Marcus back to my door before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. He arrived with pastries from the town bakery and a smile that was too bright for 7 in the morning. Thought you might be hungry, he said, setting the box on Maria's kitchen table. Remember how Dad used to bring you bear claws every Sunday morning? I did remember. I also remembered how those sweet Sunday mornings had gradually been replaced by tense conversations about credit card bills and mysterious cash withdrawals. How David's thoughtful gestures had become apologies in advance for disappointments I hadn't yet discovered. That was a long time ago, I said. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. I was thinking about that last night about Dad. About how much he'd want me to take care of you now. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. David had been dead for 8 years, and Marcus knew perfectly well that his father had died disappointed in him, heartbroken by his choices. "Your father wanted you to take care of yourself first," I said. "He never got to see you do that." Marcus's smile tightened. "That's not fair, Mama. I've changed. I've grown up. I'm not the same person I was back then." Back then. As if his addiction, his lies, his theft of David's watch to pay gambling debts were ancient history instead of the reason he'd walked out of our lives 15 years ago. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him, studying his face. He was still handsome in that dangerous way that had gotten him into trouble since he was 16. Women had always fallen for his charm, employers had always given him second chances, and creditors had always believed his promises to pay next week. "Tell me about this investment consulting business," I said. "It's going really well. I've got clients all over the Southwest, helping them diversify their portfolios, find new opportunities." He pulled out his phone and showed me what looked like a business website. Rodriguez Asset Management. I've been building the brand for about 3 years now. The website looked professional enough, but something about it felt hollow. Stock photos of handshaking businessmen, generic testimonials, no specific case studies or real client success stories. "What's your biggest success story?" I asked. Marcus scrolled through his phone for a moment too long. "Well, there's confidentiality agreements, you understand. I can't share specific client information. But I helped one rancher up in Oklahoma triple his land value by diversifying into mineral rights and renewable energy." Triple his land value. The phrase set off alarm bells in my head. Maria had always said that anyone who promised to triple your money was usually planning to steal it instead. "The thing is, Mama, I've been studying this ranch operation for months now. Even before Aunt Maria got sick, I could see the potential here." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes bright with what he probably thought was infectious enthusiasm. "We're not just talking about cattle anymore. We're talking about land development, water rights, hunting leases, maybe even wind farm opportunities." "We." There was that word again. "Maria never mentioned you've been in contact. She was a proud woman, you know that. She didn't want to admit she needed help." Marcus reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "But she did need help, Mama. This operation is hemorrhaging money." I pulled my hand away. The ledgers show consistent profit for 30 years. The ledgers show what Maria wanted them to show. But I've been looking at the real numbers, the tax returns, the bank statements, the debt service. This ranch is one bad season away from bankruptcy. That was a lie. I'd spent 4 hours the previous evening going through Maria's financial records with Rosa. The ranch wasn't just profitable, it was incredibly well managed, with cash reserves that could carry operations for 2 years even if every head of cattle dropped dead tomorrow. But Marcus didn't know I'd reviewed those records. He was counting on my ignorance, on my grief, on my presumed incompetence as a woman and a city dweller. "Even if that were true," I said carefully, "what would you propose?" "Modern management, aggressive marketing, strategic partnerships." Marcus pulled out a folder from his truck and spread papers across the table. "I've already got buyers lined up who'll pay premium prices for immediate delivery. We could move 300 head next week alone, generate immediate cash flow to stabilize operations." I looked at the papers. They were preliminary contracts with a company called Caraway Cattle Brokers, offering prices that were 15% below current market rates for immediate sale, no inspection, cash on delivery. "These prices are terrible," I said. "They're quick. Sometimes you have to sacrifice margin for velocity, especially when you're in crisis mode." Marcus gathered the papers back up. "Look, I know this is overwhelming. I know you don't have experience with these kinds of decisions. That's exactly why you need someone you can trust to handle the business side." Someone you can trust. The phrase made my stomach clench. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the cattle scattered across the morning pasture. They looked healthy, well-fed, content. Rosa was moving among them on horseback, checking on a cow that had recently calved. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Of course. Why haven't you spoken to me in 15 years? The question hung in the air like smoke. When I turned around, Marcus's expression had shifted from confident salesman to something more defensive. Mama, that's ancient history. We were both dealing with Dad's death, and emotions were running high. I said some things I didn't mean, you said some things you didn't mean. We were both grieving. You told me I killed your father. You said I was a cold, controlling bitch who drove him to an early grave. Marcus flinched. I was 24 years old and devastated. I wasn't thinking clearly. You stole his watch. The watch his father gave him. The one he'd planned to pass down to you. You stole it and pawned it to pay gambling debts. I borrowed it. I was going to get it back. With what money? You were $30,000 in debt to bookies who were threatening to break your legs. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the kitchen counter. That's all behind me now. I've been clean for over a decade. No gambling, no drinking, no drugs. I'm a different person. Clean for over a decade. But not sober from the most dangerous addiction of all, easy money. I'm glad to hear that, I said. But it doesn't answer my original question. Why now? Why, after 15 years of silence, do you suddenly want to be part of my life? Marcus turned around, and for just a moment, I saw something raw and honest in his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. But it vanished so quickly, I might have imagined it. Because I lost both my parents, he said quietly. Dad's gone, and I wasted all those years being angry at you instead of grateful for what you tried to do for me. I don't want to make that mistake again. It was a good answer. Almost good enough to believe. I appreciate that, Marcus. I really do. But I'm not ready to make any major decisions about the ranch yet. I need time to understand the operation, to meet with all the advisors Maria trusted. Marcus nodded, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. Of course. Take all the time you need. But while you're thinking, just remember, opportunities don't wait forever. Those buyers I mentioned? They'll move on to other ranchers if we don't act quickly. After he left, I found Rosa in the cattle barn, updating the breeding records. She looked up when I entered, her dark eyes questioning. Mrs. Rodriguez? Is everything all right? Rosa, how well do you know the ranch's financial situation? Pretty well. Miss Maria taught me to keep the books when Hank's arthritis got too bad for detailed writing. Rosa set down her pencil. Why do you ask? My son thinks the ranch is in financial trouble. Says we need to sell cattle quickly to generate cash flow. Rosa's expression darkened. Ma'am, with respect, your son doesn't know what he's talking about. This ranch is solid as bedrock. Miss Maria made sure of that. Show me. For the next 2 hours, Rosa walked me through every aspect of the ranch's finances. The profit and loss statements, the cash flow projections, the contracts with buyers, the breeding schedules, even the insurance policies. Maria had built something magnificent, not just profitable, but sustainable, responsible, designed to last for generations. Mrs. Rodriguez, Rosa said finally, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but your son was asking a lot of questions about things that weren't his business to know. Bank account numbers, insurance policies, even Miss Maria's will. When was this? The last few months, whenever Miss Maria was in town for treatments. He'd show up, always with some story about wanting to help, always asking to see records he had no right to see. A chill ran down my spine. Did he ever get access to anything? Rosa hesitated. One day, about 6 weeks ago, I found him in the office after hours. Said Miss Maria had given him permission to review some contracts. But when I asked Miss Maria about it later, she looked confused. Marcus had been planning this for months, maybe longer. Studying the ranch, learning its vulnerabilities, waiting for Maria to die so he could swoop in and claim authority over assets he'd never earned. But there was one thing he didn't know, one crucial detail that would change everything. That evening, I called Arturo Mendez. Arturo, I need legal advice. If someone wanted to gain control of ranch operations, what would they need from me? Power of attorney would be the most direct route, he said. With POA, they could make financial decisions, sign contracts, even sell assets on your behalf. And if I gave someone power of attorney, could I revoke it later? Certainly, but they could do significant damage before you revoked it. Why do you ask? I told him about Marcus, about the contracts he'd shown me, about his plans to modernize the operation. Arturo was quiet for a long moment. Priscilla, I think we need to have a meeting. Tomorrow, if possible. There are some things about asset protection we should discuss. What kind of things? The kind that protect people like you from people like your son. That night, I sat on Maria's porch and watched the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. The windmill at Widow's Gate turned steadily in the evening breeze, its blades catching the last light of sunset. Marcus thought I was weak, naive, overwhelmed by grief and responsibility. He thought I'd be easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to rob. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Some lessons are expensive, and some teachers don't believe in mercy. Marcus showed up the next morning with papers. Not just any papers, a power of attorney document printed from some legal website with my name already filled in and spaces for my signature highlighted in yellow. I know you said you wanted to take things slowly, he said, settling into Maria's kitchen like he belonged there, but I've been thinking about your situation all night, Mama. You're carrying too much stress, too much responsibility. It's not good for your health. My health. As if grief and responsibility were medical conditions that required his intervention. I called those buyers yesterday, and they're getting impatient, Marcus continued, spreading the papers across the table. Cattle prices are volatile right now, and if we wait too long, we could miss this opportunity entirely. I poured myself coffee and studied the document. It was boilerplate language, the kind of thing that would give him broad authority over all my financial affairs. With this signature, he could sell the ranch, liquidate the cattle, drain the bank accounts, all legally, all in my name. This seems very comprehensive, I said. It has to be. The banks, the buyers, the vendors. They all need to know they're dealing with someone who has full authority to make decisions. Marcus leaned back in his chair, projecting confidence. Don't worry, Mama. I'm not going to do anything without talking to you first. This just gives me the legal standing to act quickly when opportunities arise. Anything without talking to you first. The phrasing was careful, technical. He talked to me, but he wouldn't necessarily listen to me. I think I should have a lawyer review this, I said. Marcus's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, if that makes you feel better. But lawyers are expensive, and they have a way of making simple things complicated. This is straightforward. You're authorizing me to help you manage your affairs during this difficult time. During this difficult time. As if my grief had an expiration date, and his authority would somehow expire with it. Actually, I have a meeting with Arturo Mendez this afternoon, Maria's estate attorney. Maybe I should discuss this with him. Absolutely, Marcus said, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. Arturo's a good man, very thorough. He'll probably want to draft something more formal, more legally robust. Could take weeks to get everything properly executed. Weeks. During which the mysterious buyers would disappear and the urgent opportunities would evaporate. In the meantime, Marcus continued, would you consider a limited power of attorney? Just for immediate operational needs, paying bills, managing contracts, handling the day-to-day business that can't wait for lawyers. He pulled out another document, this one shorter, but no less comprehensive in its scope. Marcus, can I ask you something? Anything. How do you know so much about ranch operations? 3 days ago, you were in Dallas doing investment consulting. Now you're talking like you've been managing cattle operations for years. He laughed, and it sounded almost genuine. YouTube University, mama. Amazing what you can learn online these days. Plus, I've been consulting with some other ranchers, learning the business from the ground up. YouTube University. The phrase should have been reassuring. At least he was trying to educate himself. Instead, it terrified me. Marcus thought he could learn 30 years of Maria's expertise from internet videos. I'll tell you what, I said, folding the papers. Let me talk to Arturo this afternoon. If he thinks this is the right approach, I'll consider it. Marcus nodded, but his jaw was tight. Of course. But remember, every day we wait is money lost. Those cattle out there aren't getting any younger, and the market won't wait for us to get our paperwork in order. After he left, I called Rosa to the house. I need you to do something for me, I said. I want you to call those buyers Marcus mentioned, Caraway cattle brokers. Find out what you can about them.
Rosa nodded.
Already did, ma'am. Soon as you told me about them yesterday. And Vince Caraway's got a reputation. Buys cattle cheap from people who are desperate or don't know better, then resells them at market rates. Some folks say he's not too particular about paperwork, if you know what I mean. I knew what she meant. Cattle rustling was an old crime with new methods. There's something else, Rosa continued. I called around to some other ranches, asking if anyone knew your son. 3 operations said they'd had calls from someone claiming to be doing market research, asking detailed questions about their operations, their financial situations, their estate planning. Market research. Marcus had been casting a wide net, looking for vulnerable ranches, desperate families, opportunities to exploit. Mrs. Rodriguez, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your son reminds me of a man who tried to court my sister after her husband died. All charm and promises, talking about how he'd take care of everything, how she deserved to be pampered and protected. Rosa's expression was grim. 6 months later, she was broke and he was gone. That afternoon, I met with Arturo Mendez and Siobhan Kerr, a litigation attorney he'd brought in for what he called asset protection planning. Siobhan was a woman about my age, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd reviewed the power of attorney documents Marcus had given me, and her assessment was blunt. This document would give your son complete control over your financial life, she said. He could sell the ranch, liquidate your accounts, even take out loans against your assets, all without your consent. But he said he wouldn't do anything without discussing it with me first. Siobhan and Arturo exchanged a look. Mrs. Rodriguez, Siobhan said gently, what people say and what legal documents allow them to do are often very different things. This POA has no meaningful limitations, no oversight mechanisms, no accountability requirements. So, what do you recommend? If you truly want to give your son some operational authority, we can draft a much more limited document, Arturo said. A management services agreement that gives him specific responsibilities with specific limitations. Siobhan pulled out a legal pad and began sketching. We could create a structure where your son manages day-to-day operations through a limited liability company with performance metrics, financial reporting requirements, and your retained veto power over major decisions. It would look like he has authority, Arturo added, but the real control would remain with you. I thought about Marcus's impatience, his pressure for immediate action, his dismissal of legal oversight as unnecessary complication. How long would it take to set up? A week, maybe 2, Siobhan said. We'd need to create the management company, draft the operating agreements, establish the reporting requirements, and file the necessary paperwork. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you remain the sole decision-maker for all ranch operations, Arturo said. No contracts get signed, no cattle get sold, no money changes hands without your explicit approval. That evening, Marcus called. How'd the meeting go with the lawyers? Very well. They're going to draft something more formal. More formal how? I could hear the tension in his voice. A management services agreement. Arturo thinks it will provide better legal protection for both of us. There was a long pause. Mama, we don't need more legal protection. We need action. Those buyers I told you about? They're starting to look at other ranchers. If we don't move soon, we'll lose this opportunity entirely. What's the rush, Marcus? The cattle aren't going anywhere. The market is, Mama. Beef prices are at a peak right now, but they're volatile. Every week we wait could cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. His voice took on that urgent, pressuring tone I remembered from his gambling days. Look, I understand you want to be careful, but sometimes being too careful costs more than taking calculated risks. Calculated risks. The phrase David used to use when he was about to make another bad bet. I trust Arturo's judgment, I said. Maria trusted him for 30 years. And that's fine for normal times. But these aren't normal times, Mama. You're sitting on assets worth over $25 million, and you're treating them like they're going to manage themselves. $25 million. He'd done his math carefully. I'll call you when the lawyers finish their work, I said, and hung up. But Marcus wasn't finished with me. An hour later, he was back at my door, this time with a different approach. I owe you an apology, he said, hat in hand, looking genuinely contrite. I got pushy on the phone, and that wasn't fair. You're dealing with a lot right now, and the last thing you need is pressure from me. I let him in, curious to see what angle he'd try next. The truth is, Mama, I'm scared, he said, settling into the living room chair that had been David's favorite. I'm scared I'll lose you the way I lost Dad. I'm scared I wasted so many years being angry when I should have been grateful. And I'm scared that if I don't help you now, when you really need it, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. It was a good performance. If I hadn't spent the last 3 days learning about his months of surveillance and planning, I might have believed it. I appreciate that, Marcus. But helping me doesn't require power of attorney. You're right, absolutely right. I was thinking like a businessman instead of like a son. He leaned forward, hands clasped. What if we try something smaller? A trial run, just to see how it works. What kind of trial run? Let me handle one transaction. Just one. Those 300 head I mentioned. Let me negotiate that sale, handle the logistics, prove to you that I know what I'm doing. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me some calculations. If I can get even 10% above the market rate Caraway offered, that's an extra $40,000 in your pocket. 10% above market rate. From a broker who specialized in below-market purchases. And if it doesn't work out, then you fire me, and we never discuss business again. I'll go back to Dallas, and you can manage everything through the lawyers. Marcus met my eyes. But if it does work out, if I prove I can add value, then maybe we talk about a more formal arrangement. It was clever. A small test that would seem reasonable, that would give him access to ranch operations, buyers, financial information, everything he'd need to plan his real move. I'll think about it, I said. Fair enough.
But Mama?
Those buyers won't wait forever. Caraway called me this morning, said he's got other opportunities if we can't move quickly. Caraway called him. Marcus was already negotiating on my behalf, already presenting himself as my agent, already setting up the infrastructure for his takeover. After he left, I sat in Maria's office and called Arturo. He's not going to wait for us to finish the legal work, I told him. He's trying to pressure me into giving him immediate authority for a test transaction. Don't, Arturo said immediately. Once he has any legal authority, even limited authority, it becomes much harder to control how he uses it. But what if I'm wrong about him? What if he really has changed and I'm just being paranoid because of our history? Arturo was quiet for a moment. Priscilla, has he asked you anything about yourself? About your life, your health, your plans? Has he shown any interest in rebuilding a relationship with you that doesn't involve money? I thought about our conversations. Every word had been about the ranch, the cattle, the business opportunities. Marcus hadn't asked about my life in Austin, my work, my friends, my health. Nothing that didn't relate to the assets he wanted to control. No, I said quietly. He hasn't. Then trust your instincts. And trust Maria's warning in her letter. That night, I dreamed about David. In the dream, we were young again, dancing in our first apartment, before Marcus was born, before the gambling, before the lies and the debts and the heartbreak. Dream David was happy, carefree, full of plans for our future. Be careful, Priscilla, he said as the dream began to fade. Some hungers never change, they just learn to hide better. I woke with tears on my face and a decision in my heart. Marcus wanted to play games?
Fine.
I'd play games too, but I'd be playing by Maria's rules, not his. The next morning, I called Marcus with an offer. I've been thinking about your proposal, I said. The trial transaction. I'm willing to consider it, but I want proper documentation. I could hear the excitement in his voice. Of course, absolutely. Whatever makes you comfortable. I want to meet with you, Arturo, and Siobhan today. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Today? That seems fast, but yes, absolutely. I can be there whenever you need me. The eagerness in his voice was almost pitiable. Almost. 3 hours later, we sat around the conference table in Arturo's office. Marcus wore his best suit and his most charming smile, playing the role of the responsible son helping his grieving mother. Siobhan had prepared a stack of documents that looked intimidating but were actually quite simple in their purpose, to create a legal framework that would allow Marcus to hang himself with his own rope. The structure we're proposing, Arturo explained, creates a limited liability company called Whitmore Ranch Management, with your son as the managing member. Marcus nodded eagerly. That sounds perfect. The LLC will have operational authority over day-to-day ranch activities, Siobhan continued, but within very specific parameters. She slid the first document across the table, a management services agreement between me and the LLC. This agreement grants the LLC authority to manage cattle sales, negotiate contracts, and handle routine operations, Siobhan explained. However, it requires detailed financial reporting, maintains dual signature requirements for transactions over $5,000, and includes automatic termination clauses for breach of fiduciary duty. Marcus skimmed the document, his lawyer-phobic eyes glazing over at the legal language. This looks fine. Very thorough. There's also a personal guarantee requirement, Arturo added, sliding another document across the table. Since the LLC will be handling substantial assets, your son will personally guarantee any losses resulting from unauthorized transactions or breach of contract. Personal guarantee? Marcus looked up, suddenly more focused. Standard business practice, Siobhan said smoothly. It protects your mother's interests and demonstrates your confidence in your ability to manage the operation profitably. Marcus hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. Of course. I'm confident in my abilities. The third document was the most important, though Marcus didn't know it yet. A UCC, one financing statement that would secure all ranch assets against any unauthorized disposition. This filing protects the ranch in case of operational disputes, Arturo explained. It ensures that all assets remain properly secured during the management transition. And this one, Siobhan said, presenting the final document, establishes audit rights and automatic reporting requirements to state agricultural authorities. Marcus signed everything without reading it carefully. His excitement at finally getting official authority overcame his caution, exactly what we'd counted on. When can I start? He asked, pen still in hand. Immediately, I said. The LLC is officially authorized to begin operations as of this afternoon. Marcus practically floated out of the office. As soon as he was gone, Siobhan turned to me with a predatory smile. Your son just signed agreements that make him personally liable for any unauthorized asset disposition, subject to automatic audit triggers and bound by fiduciary duties that carry criminal penalties for violation. In other words, if he tries to steal from you, he's just provided us with all the legal ammunition we need to prosecute him and recover every penny. That afternoon, Marcus threw himself into his new role with theatrical enthusiasm. He set up an office in the ranch's administration building, created business cards identifying himself as operations manager, and started making phone calls to establish his authority with vendors and buyers. Rosa kept me informed of his activities with detailed reports that were both amusing and alarming. He spent 2 hours on the phone with Caraway Cattle Brokers, she told me, negotiating a sale of 300 head for immediate delivery. At what price? 15% below market rate, just like before. But he told Caraway he has full authority to complete the transaction without your approval. Does he? According to the contract he signed, any sale over $5,000 requires your written authorization. 300 head is about $600,000. So, if he completes that sale, he's in breach of contract and personally liable for the difference between market rate and sale price, about $90,000. Marcus had walked into a trap so elegant he'd helped build it himself. But I wasn't finished yet. That evening, Marcus called to update me on his progress. Great news, Mama. I've locked in that sale with Caraway, and they're willing to pay cash on delivery. We're talking about $600,000 hitting our account within 48 hours. Our account, as if the money belonged to both of us. That sounds wonderful, Marcus. Did you get my written authorization for the transaction? There was a pause. Written authorization? I thought we agreed I had operational authority. For transactions under $5,000. The management agreement requires written authorization for anything larger. Another pause, longer this time. Well, that's easy enough to fix. Can you just email me an authorization? Of course. But I'll need to review the sales contract first, make sure the terms are acceptable. Mama, we don't have time for extended negotiations. Caraway is ready to move now, but if we delay, he'll find another seller. I understand. Why don't you bring me the contract tomorrow morning, and we'll review it together? I could hear the frustration in his voice. But remember, every day we wait costs us money. The next morning, Marcus arrived with a sales contract that was even worse than I'd expected. Not only were the prices below market rate, but the terms included immediate delivery without health inspections, no breed documentation requirements, and cash payment to an account controlled solely by Whitmore Ranch Management LLC. Marcus, this contract has some problems. What kind of problems? Well, for one thing, it doesn't comply with state cattle inspection requirements. All sales over 50 head require health certifications and brand inspections. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Caraway says he can handle all that paperwork after delivery. It's more efficient this way. More efficient, or completely illegal. I'm not comfortable signing this authorization, I said. Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the anger underneath. Mama, you hired me to manage operations, but you're micromanaging every decision. Either you trust me or you don't. I trust you to follow the law and the terms of our agreement. The law is flexible in situations like this. Caraway knows what he's doing. I'm sure he does. But I don't think we should be doing business with someone who encourages us to skip legal requirements. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You say you want help, but you don't actually want to let anyone help you. I want help that doesn't involve breaking the law. It's not breaking the law, it's expediting the process. Marcus turned back to me, his voice taking on that urgent, pressuring tone. Mama, you're going to lose this sale. And when you do, you're going to lose other sales too because word gets around. People will know you're difficult to work with. People will know. As if my reputation in the cattle business depended on my willingness to cooperate with shady brokers. I think we need to find different buyers, I said. Marcus's face flushed red. Different buyers? Mama, I've spent weeks setting up these relationships. You can't just throw that away because you're paranoid about paperwork. Paranoid about paperwork. The phrase would have been funny if it weren't so revealing. Marcus, I appreciate your efforts, but I'm not signing this authorization. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, trying to figure out his next move. Fine, he said finally. But I want you to understand what you're doing. You're sabotaging your own business because you don't trust your own son. After he left, I called Siobhan. He's going to try to complete the sale without authorization, I told her. Probably. And when he does, he'll be in violation of the management agreement, the personal guarantee, and state law. We'll have him. What if he realizes the trap and backs out? Siobhan laughed. Priscilla, your son is so focused on the money, he can't see the walls closing in around him. He's going to walk right into this. That night, I sat on Maria's porch and watched the lights in the ranch office. Marcus was working late, making phone calls, sending emails, arranging his unauthorized transaction. He thought I was weak, naive, easily manipulated. He thought he could pressure me into compliance, browbeat me into submission, guilt me into surrender. Tomorrow he was going to learn how wrong he was. Some traps are obvious, designed to catch the unwary. But the most effective traps are the ones that let the prey capture themselves. Marcus was about to discover the difference. Marcus moved fast. By 6 a.m. the next morning, 3 cattle trucks were parked at our loading dock, and he was directing ranch hands to separate specific animals from the herd. I watched from the kitchen window as he strutted around the operation, wearing a new Stetson and boots that probably cost more than most of our workers made in a month. Rosa appeared at my side, her expression grim. He's loading the premium breeding stock, she said quietly. The animals Miss Maria spent years developing. Those aren't market cattle, they're the foundation of our genetics program. I felt my heart sink. Those cattle represented decades of careful breeding decisions, bloodlines that couldn't be replaced, the heart of Maria's legacy. Can we stop him? Not legally. He's the operations manager, and he's giving lawful orders to ranch employees. But Mrs. Rodriguez, none of those animals have current health certificates. State law requires inspection within 72 hours of sale. Marcus was breaking the law, just as we'd predicted. But watching him load Maria's irreplaceable cattle onto trucks bound for an illegal sale still made me feel sick. How many head? 327. The best we have. 327 cattle worth approximately $1.2 million at market rates, being sold to Vince Caraway for $800,000, a theft of $400,000, disguised as a business transaction. I called Arturo and put him on speaker so Rosa could hear. He's completing the unauthorized sale right now, I told him. Perfect. We have him for breach of contract, violation of fiduciary duty, and unauthorized disposition of assets. The personal guarantee makes him liable for the full market value of the cattle. What about the ranch employees? They're following his orders. They're protected. They're following instructions from someone with apparent authority. Marcus is the one who bears legal responsibility. After the trucks left, Marcus came to the house with a check for $800,000 and a smile that was pure triumph. Mama, I just closed the biggest cattle sale in this ranch's history, he announced, waving the check like a trophy. $800,000 cash, deposited directly into the ranch account. Congratulations, I said quietly. This is just the beginning. Caraway was so impressed with the quality of our stock that he wants to establish an ongoing relationship. We could be looking at monthly sales of this size. Monthly sales that would strip the ranch of its breeding foundation and destroy 30 years of genetic development. But Marcus didn't understand that because he saw cattle as commodities instead of living assets. "How did you manage the health inspections so quickly?" I asked. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Caraway handled all that. He's got relationships with the state inspectors, expedited the whole process." Expedited. Another word for skipped entirely. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. You've certainly proven you can get things done." His chest puffed up with pride. "I told you I'd change, Mama. I told you I could handle this." That afternoon, Marcus called a meeting with all the ranch employees. He stood in front of the cattle barn wearing his expensive new hat, addressing 23 men and women who'd worked for Maria with quiet confidence for decades. "I want to thank you all for your cooperation this morning," he began. "We accomplished something historic today, the largest single cattle sale in Whitmore Ranch history." Several of the older hands exchanged glances. They knew exactly what had been sold, and they knew it wasn't something to celebrate. "Going forward, we're going to be operating differently around here," Marcus continued. "More efficiently, more profitably, more aggressively. This ranch has been coasting on old methods for too long." Old methods. Maria's methods. The approaches that had built this operation into one of the most respected ranches in West Texas. "I know some of you are set in your ways, and change can be uncomfortable. But anyone who can't adapt to our new operational philosophy is welcome to find employment elsewhere." Rosa raised her hand. "Mr. Hale, what about the breeding program? Those cattle you sold this morning were our foundation stock." Marcus's smile tightened. "The breeding program is being restructured for maximum efficiency. We're moving away from expensive, specialized bloodlines toward more commercially viable stock." Translation: he was going to strip mine the ranch's genetic assets and sell everything for quick cash. Hank Albright, our 67-year-old foreman, stepped forward. "Son, I've been managing cattle longer than you've been alive. Those animals you sold today took Miss Maria 30 years to develop. You can't just replace genetics like that." "Mr. Albright, I appreciate your experience, but this is a business, not a museum. We're here to make money, not preserve bloodlines for sentimental reasons." Hank's weathered face flushed red. Sentimental reasons? Boy, those sentimental bloodlines generated premium prices because buyers knew they were getting superior animals. You just sold $1 million genetics program for scrap money. Marcus's mask slipped completely. "Mr. Albright, you're out of line. I'm the operations manager here, and I make the decisions about what cattle to sell and when to sell them. You're making the wrong decisions. Then maybe you're not the right foreman for this operation." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Hank had given 32 years of his life to this ranch, had been Maria's most trusted advisor, had earned the respect of every cattleman in the region. "You're firing me?" Hank asked quietly. "I'm terminating employees who can't adapt to new management philosophies." Hank nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. He set them on the workbench, then removed his spurs, hand-forged silver that his grandfather had made, and placed them beside the keys. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, looking directly at me, "your sister was the finest cattlewoman I ever knew. It's been an honor to work for her and for you." Without another word, he walked to his truck and drove away. The remaining employees stood in shocked silence. Marcus had just fired the most respected man on the ranch, a living symbol of everything Maria had built. "Anyone else have concerns about our new direction?" Marcus asked. No one spoke, but the hostility was palpable. After the meeting, Rosa found me in the house. "Mrs. Rodriguez, half the crew is talking about quitting. They can't work for a man who doesn't respect what Miss Maria built." I thought about Hank, about his dignity in the face of humiliation, about the spurs he'd left behind like an offering on Maria's altar. "Rosa, How many of those cattle trucks do you think actually went to Caraway's legitimate operation? She was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, I made some calls. Caraway Cattle Brokers doesn't have facilities to handle 300 head. Word is, those trucks went straight to an auction barn in Oklahoma, and the cattle were sold under false documentation. Cattle rustling, the oldest crime in Texas, dressed up in business suits and management contracts. We need to call Sheriff Cortez, I said. But Rosa was already shaking her head. Sheriff's out of town until tomorrow. Family emergency. Of course she was. Marcus had timed this perfectly, waiting until law enforcement was unavailable and our most experienced foreman was silenced. That evening, Marcus celebrated his triumph with expensive whiskey and loud phone calls to business associates who probably didn't exist. He'd moved his belongings into Maria's guest bedroom without asking permission, treating the house like his own. "Mama," he said, slightly drunk and thoroughly pleased with himself, "you should have seen those buyers' faces today. They knew they were dealing with a serious operation, a serious manager. Not some old woman who doesn't understand modern business. Some old woman, Maria, who'd built this empire from nothing, who'd earned the respect of every rancher from El Paso to Houston, who'd left behind a legacy of excellence that Marcus was systematically destroying. I'm proud of you." I lied. "This is just the beginning. Tomorrow I'm meeting with some developers who are interested in the water rights. Did you know this ranch sits on one of the largest aquifers in Texas? Water rights. The one asset that could destroy the ranch forever if mismanaged. Developers? Industrial farming operations. They're willing to pay premium prices for guaranteed water access." Marcus poured himself another whiskey. "We're talking about millions of dollars, Mama."
Million.
He was going to sell the water that kept our cattle alive, that sustained our grass, that made the ranch viable. He was going to strip mine every asset Maria had protected and turn it into cash he could pocket. That night, I lay in bed listening to Marcus make phone calls until 2 in the morning. He was setting up more deals, arranging more sales, accelerating his timeline for liquidating everything Maria had built. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd proven his competence and secured his position. He thought he was untouchable. Tomorrow, Sheriff Cortez would return. Tomorrow the trap would close. Tomorrow, Marcus would learn that some victories are more expensive than defeats. Before we continue with Priscilla's story, I want to share something important with you. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. This book has helped thousands of women just like Priscilla, and just like you, discover their inner strength and write their own triumphant endings. Whether you're dealing with family betrayal, financial stress, or simply feeling like life has passed you by, this book will show you that your most powerful chapters are still ahead of you. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. Don't let anyone tell you it's too late to reclaim your power. Now let's see how Priscilla handles the next phase of her battle. Sheriff Lila Cortez returned to find chaos waiting for her. The first call came from the State Agricultural Commission, reporting suspicious cattle shipments that had crossed state lines without proper documentation. The second came from a livestock auction in Oklahoma, asking about the authenticity of health certificates that appeared to be forged. The third call came from me. "Sheriff, I need to report unauthorized cattle sales and possible theft from Whitmore Ranch." Lila Cortez was a practical woman in her 50s who'd grown up on a ranch herself. She understood the difference between aggressive business practices and criminal activity, and she didn't appreciate people who tried to blur that line. "How many head are we talking about, Mrs. Rodriguez?" 327 head of registered breeding stock, sold without proper health inspections to a buyer known for questionable practices. "And you didn't authorize the sale?" I specifically refused to authorize it. My son completed the transaction anyway, claiming operational authority he doesn't actually possess. There was a pause while Sheriff Cortez absorbed the implications. Ma'am, that sounds like theft by conversion, possibly crossing state lines. That's federal territory. I understand. I have documentation of everything. I'll be there in an hour. Sheriff Cortez arrived with a deputy and a thick folder of complaints that had been building against Caraway cattle brokers for months. Apparently, Marcus had chosen the wrong business partner. Caraway's been on our radar for a while, she explained as we sat in Maria's office. Suspicious transactions, questionable documentation, cash payments that don't match reported values. But we've never had a solid case against him until now. Rosa provided the sheriff with copies of the bills of sale, the management agreement Marcus had signed, and the personal guarantee that made him liable for unauthorized transactions. This is interesting, Sheriff Cortez said, reviewing the documents. Your son signed a contract that explicitly prohibits unauthorized sales, then immediately violated that contract. And he made himself personally liable for any losses. Can you recover the cattle? The cattle are already sold and scattered. But we can certainly recover the money, and we can prosecute everyone involved in the fraudulent transaction. Marcus chose that moment to walk into the office, still wearing his expensive hat and carrying himself like the successful businessman he imagined himself to be. Mama, who are these people? Is there some kind of problem? Sheriff Cortez stood up, her hand resting casually on her service weapon. Mr. Hale, I'm Sheriff Cortez. We need to discuss some cattle transactions that took place yesterday. Marcus's confident smile faltered slightly. Oh, the Caraway sale? That was completely legitimate business. I have all the paperwork. I'm sure you do. The problem is, the paperwork appears to be fraudulent, and the sale was completed without proper authorization. I had full operational authority. My mother signed a management agreement giving me complete control over ranch operations. Sheriff Cortez looked at the contract Rosa had provided. Actually, sir, this agreement specifically requires written authorization for any transaction over $5,000. Yesterday's sale was worth approximately $1.2 million. Do you have written authorization from Mrs. Rodriguez? Marcus looked at me, his eyes suddenly uncertain. She gave me verbal authorization. No, I said quietly. I specifically refused to authorize that sale. The color drained from Marcus's face. That's not. You can't just change your mind after the fact. I had good faith belief that I was authorized to complete that transaction. Good faith belief based on what? Sheriff Cortez asked. Marcus stammered, looking around the room like he was searching for an escape route. Based on the management agreement. Based on our verbal discussions. Based on her hiring me to manage operations. Mr. Hale, are you familiar with the term theft by conversion? Marcus's face went completely white. Theft? This wasn't theft. This was a business transaction. I was trying to help my mother generate income from underperforming assets. Underperforming assets. He was still trying to justify stripping Maria's life work for quick cash. Sir, I need you to come with me to answer some questions about this transaction. Am I under arrest? Not yet. But that could change depending on how cooperative you are. Marcus looked at me with desperate eyes. Mama, tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them you authorized me to make that sale. I met his gaze steadily. I can't tell them something that isn't true, Marcus. For a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine fear cross his face. Then it was replaced by anger, the familiar rage that had driven him away 15 years ago. You set me up, he said. This whole thing was a setup. You never intended to let me help you. I intended to let you prove what kind of man you'd become, I replied. You've done exactly that. Sheriff Cortez stepped between us. Mr. Hale, we need to go now. As they led Marcus toward the door, he turned back to me one final time. "You did this to me," he said, "just like you did to Dad. You destroy everyone who tries to love you." The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. "No, Marcus. You did this to yourself." After they left, I sat in Maria's office, surrounded by the evidence of my son's betrayal. Rosa brought me coffee and sat quietly beside me, her presence a comfort in the chaos. "Mrs. Rodriguez, are you all right?" I thought about the question. Was I all right? My son was probably going to prison. My ranch had been robbed of its most valuable assets. My family was destroyed beyond any hope of repair. But Maria's legacy was protected. The remaining cattle were safe. The ranch would survive. "I'm all right," I said finally. "I'm exactly where I need to be." That evening, Arturo called with updates on the legal situation. "The FBI is involved now because the cattle crossed state lines," he told me. "They're treating this as organized fraud, not just a family dispute." What does that mean for Marcus? Federal charges, probably multiple felony counts. Even if he cooperates fully, he's looking at significant prison time. Prison time. My son, who I'd carried in my womb, who I'd rocked to sleep as a baby, who I'd loved despite everything he'd done, going to federal prison because he couldn't resist the urge to steal. "There's something else," Arturo continued. "The FBI found evidence that Marcus has been running similar scams on other ranching families. Elderly widows, mostly. People dealing with grief and inheritance issues. Other families. Other mothers who'd trusted their children and been betrayed. How many others? At least 6 that they've identified so far. Possibly more. Your son appears to have made a career out of exploiting vulnerable families during times of loss. A career out of exploitation. Marcus hadn't just stolen from me. He'd built his entire adult life around stealing from grieving mothers." "Priscilla, I want you to understand something," Arturo said gently. "What happened here wasn't about you failing as a mother. This was about Marcus choosing to become a predator." A predator. The word fit perfectly. That night, I walked out to Widow's Gate and stood beneath the windmill that never stopped turning. The stars were brilliant in the clear Texas sky, and the wind carried the scent of grass and cattle and the eternal promise of tomorrow. Marcus was gone, but the ranch remained. Maria's legacy remained. The truth remained. Some hungers can never be satisfied, no matter how much you feed them. But some hungers can be starved out if you're strong enough to stop feeding them. I was strong enough. I was finally strong enough. The next morning brought reporters. Word had leaked about the FBI investigation, and suddenly my private family tragedy was front-page news across West Texas. Ranching dynasty rocked by fraud scandal. Mother's betrayal leads to son's arrest. Whitmore Ranch, a legacy under siege. I stood on Maria's front porch, watching strangers with cameras and notebooks gather outside my gate, and felt a familiar anger building in my chest. These people didn't know Maria, didn't understand what she'd built, didn't care about anything except the sensational headline. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Local television stations wanting interviews. Dallas newspapers wanting statements. True crime podcasters wanting exclusive access to the grieving mother torn between love and justice. I turned off my phone and made coffee. Rosa found me in the kitchen an hour later, looking like she hadn't slept. "Mrs. Rodriguez, there's something you need to know. Mr. Marcus called the ranch office this morning from jail." "What did he want?" "He wanted me to change the books. Said if I could make the cattle sale look legitimate, he could claim it was all a misunderstanding." Rosa's expression was grim. "He offered me $50,000 to alter the records." Even from jail, Marcus was still scheming, still looking for ways to escape the consequences of his choices. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I don't work for thieves." An hour later, Arturo arrived with Siobhan, and a stack of legal documents that represented the final phase of our trap. The FBI has completed their initial investigation, Siobhan reported. They've recovered approximately $600,000 from Caraway's accounts, which represents the proceeds from the illegal cattle sale. What about the other $200,000? Processing fees, transportation costs, auction commissions. It's gone, but Marcus is personally liable for the full amount under the guarantee agreement. Marcus would owe me $1.2 million, the full market value of the stolen cattle, plus legal fees, plus criminal restitution. Even if he worked for the rest of his life, he'd never be able to repay what he'd stolen. There's more, Arturo continued. The FBI investigation has uncovered evidence of similar frauds targeting at least 8 other ranching families across Texas and Oklahoma. Marcus apparently specialized in targeting recently widowed women who'd inherited agricultural operations. The words hit me like a physical blow. 8 other families. 8 other mothers who'd trusted their children or relatives and been systematically robbed during their most vulnerable moments. They're calling it the Vulture Son scheme, Siobhan added. Circle grieving families, pose as helpful relatives or business consultants, gain financial authority through fraudulent documents, then strip valuable assets and disappear. The Vulture Son. Even the FBI understood what Marcus had become. What's going to happen to him? Federal charges for wire fraud, conspiracy, theft by conversion, and racketeering. He's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Arturo's voice was matter-of-fact, professional. The other victims are also filing civil suits for recovery. 20 years. Marcus would be 54 years old when he got out of prison if he got out. His entire life, destroyed by greed he couldn't control. Mrs. Rodriguez, Siobhan said gently, I need to ask you something difficult. Are you prepared to testify against your son? I thought about the question. Was I prepared to stand up in federal court and tell the world how my own child had tried to rob me? Was I prepared to help send him to prison for decades? Yes, I said without hesitation. I'm prepared. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about 8 other families, 8 other women who'd been preyed upon by someone they trusted. This was about making sure Marcus never had the opportunity to destroy another family. That afternoon, the phone rang again. This time it was Marcus calling from jail. Mama, I need you to listen to me, he said, his voice urgent and desperate. This whole thing is a misunderstanding. Caraway took advantage of me, made me think everything was legal. I was trying to help you, I swear. Marcus. I'll pay everything back, every penny. I'll work for the rest of my life if I have to. Just please, please don't testify against me. The pain in his voice was real, but so was the manipulation. Even now, even facing federal prison, he was trying to use my love against me. I can't do that, Marcus. You're my mother. The desperation cracked his voice. You're supposed to protect me, not destroy me. I am protecting you. I'm protecting you from yourself, the way I should have done 15 years ago. By sending me to prison? By stopping you from hurting anyone else. There was a long silence on the line. You'll regret this, Marcus said finally, his voice cold and hard. When I'm gone and you're all alone in that house, you'll regret choosing money over your own son. I didn't choose money over you, Marcus. You chose money over me. I hung up and sat in Maria's office, surrounded by the ledgers and records that represented 30 years of honest work. Outside, the cattle grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun, and the windmill at Widow's Gate turned steadily in the eternal wind. The reporters were still gathered at the gate, still hungry for the story of the betrayed mother and the criminal son. But they didn't understand the real story. The real story wasn't about betrayal, it was about boundaries. It wasn't about a family destroyed, it was about a legacy protected. It wasn't about love defeated, it was about love finally becoming strong enough to say no. That evening, Rosa knocked on my door with an unexpected visitor. Hank Albright stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking uncertain for the first time since I'd known him. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I heard about what happened. I wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For not seeing what your son was planning. For not protecting Miss Maria's cattle the way I should have." Hank's weathered face was filled with regret. "Those animals were my responsibility, and I let them get stolen. Hank, you couldn't have known. Marcus fooled everyone." "Maybe. But I should have trusted my instincts. Should have called you the moment he started asking questions about genetics and bloodlines." Hank straightened his shoulders. "I was wondering if you'd have me back. This ranch needs someone who understands what Miss Maria built." I looked at this man who'd given 32 years of his life to our operation, who'd been humiliated and fired for trying to protect what he loved, who was now offering to come back despite everything. "Are you sure you want to work for a family with this much drama?" Hank smiled for the first time since he'd been fired. "Ma'am, I don't work for families. I work for the land and the cattle and the legacy. And that's still here." "Then welcome back, Hank. We need you." As Hank walked back to his truck, I felt something shift inside my chest. For the first time since Maria's death, I didn't feel alone. I had Rosa's loyalty, Hank's experience, and the support of people who understood what we were trying to protect. The ranch would survive. Maria's legacy would continue. And Marcus. Marcus would learn that some consequences can't be avoided, no matter how charming your smile or how desperate your promises. The federal courthouse in Austin was a monument to justice that felt nothing like justice to me. I sat in the witness chair, under oath, looking at my son across a courtroom filled with reporters, victims, and federal agents. Marcus wore an orange jumpsuit and looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the reality of his situation. The federal prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, walked me through the evidence methodically. The forged documents, the unauthorized sales, the fraudulent representations to buyers, the systematic theft of breeding stock worth over $1 million. "Mrs. Rodriguez, did you ever give your son written authorization to sell those cattle?" "No, I did not." "Did you ever give him verbal authorization?"
No.
"I specifically refused to authorize that sale." "And yet, he completed the transaction anyway?" "Yes." Marcus's defense attorney, a tired-looking public defender, tried to paint his client as a well-meaning son who'd gotten in over his head with unscrupulous business partners. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the pattern of similar crimes made it impossible to claim innocent mistakes. When it was Marcus's turn to testify, he took the stand with the same confidence he'd always projected. But under cross-examination, the facade crumbled quickly. "Mr. Hale, isn't it true that you researched your aunt's medical condition for months before her death?" I was concerned about family members. Concerned enough to photograph financial documents without permission? I wanted to understand the family's situation. "Isn't it true that you contacted at least 6 other ranching families using similar tactics?" Marcus's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury could see what he was, a predator who specialized in hunting grieving families. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month, but Marcus never made it that far. 3 days after his conviction, while being transported between facilities, he slipped away from his guards during a medical appointment and simply vanished. Sheriff Cortez called me with the news at 7 in the morning. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to inform you that your son has escaped federal custody. He's considered armed and dangerous, and there's a nationwide manhunt underway." Armed and dangerous. Marcus, who'd never held a real job for more than 6 months, who'd built his entire adult life around stealing from vulnerable women, was now a federal fugitive. "Do you think he'll come here?" "It's possible. We're posting surveillance on the ranch, and I recommend you stay somewhere else until he's recaptured." But I wasn't leaving Maria's ranch. This was my home now, my responsibility, my legacy to protect. If Marcus wanted to come back and face the consequences of his choices, he was welcome to try. I spent that evening sitting on the front porch with Maria's revolver in my lap, watching the road and thinking about the son I'd raised and the stranger he'd become. Rosa and Hank took shifts keeping me company, but we all knew that if Marcus was desperate enough to risk everything for one final score, he'd wait until I was alone. He came at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks later. I woke to the sound of breaking glass in Maria's office. By the time I reached the window, I could see a figure moving through the darkness with a flashlight, searching through filing cabinets and desk drawers. I called 911, then sat in the dark and waited. Marcus was looking for something specific, cash, maybe, or account information that would give him access to liquid assets. He was probably planning to steal whatever he could carry and disappear across the Mexican border, just 2 hours south. The sheriff's deputies arrived silently, surrounding the house and cutting off all escape routes. When they kicked in the office door, Marcus was stuffing Maria's emergency cash into a backpack, $2,000 she'd kept for emergencies, the last liquid asset on the property. They found him crouched behind the desk like a cornered animal, clutching stolen money and looking nothing like the confident businessman who'd charmed his way into my trust. As they led him away in handcuffs, Marcus caught sight of me standing on the porch. "You did this to me," he screamed, struggling against the officers. "You destroyed your own son for money. What kind of mother destroys her own child?" The question hung in the night air like an accusation. What kind of mother destroys her own child? The kind who finally understands that protecting someone from consequences isn't love, it's enabling destruction. The kind who chooses to save future victims instead of shielding past criminals. The kind who learns that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to rescue someone from the life they've chosen. The kind who loves him enough to stop him, I whispered to the darkness. 6 months later, I stood at Widow's Gate watching Hank and Rosa work with a new group of young ranch hands, teaching them the principles Maria had lived by. Marcus had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. The other victims of his scheme had recovered most of their losses through civil suits and asset forfeiture. The ranch had been restored to full operation, with new cattle purchased to rebuild our depleted breeding program. The reporters had moved on to other scandals, other tragedies, other families willing to bleed in public for entertainment. We were old news now, which was exactly how I preferred it. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Rosa climbed the hill toward the windmill, carrying a letter. "This came for you today." The envelope was from the federal prison in Texas, where Marcus was serving his sentence. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unread. But curiosity, or perhaps hope, made me open it.
Mama.
"I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask for anything after what I did. But I wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did. Prison gives you a lot of time to think about the choices you've made, the people you've hurt, the opportunities you've wasted. I've been thinking about Dad, about the disappointment in his eyes when he realized what I'd become. I've been thinking about Aunt Maria, about how she must have felt watching me circle her like a vulture while she was dying. Most of all, I've been thinking about you. About how I blamed you for Dad's death when the truth was that he died of a broken heart because his son was a thief and a liar. About how I blamed you for being strong when what I really hated was my own weakness. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, and I'm not sure I've earned it yet. But I wanted you to know that I'm finally getting help. Real help, not just promises to change. There's a counselor here who specializes in addiction and family trauma, and for the first time in my life, I'm being honest about what I've done and why I did it. I stole from you because I felt entitled to what you had. I manipulated you because I thought I was smarter than you. I hurt you because hurting people was easier than facing my own pain. I was wrong about everything. You didn't destroy me, Mama. You saved me. You finally gave me consequences that were bigger than my ability to charm my way out of them. You loved me enough to stop enabling me, even though it broke your heart. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused. I know I can't give you back the years we lost or the trust one destroyed. But I can promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life trying to become the man Dad wanted me to be, the man you deserve to raise. When I get out of here, I won't ask to come home. I won't ask for money or help or anything except the chance to prove that I've finally learned how to be responsible for my own life.
I love you, Mama.
I'm sorry it took losing everything to learn how to say that honestly. Your son, Marcus. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket, then looked out over the ranch that had cost so much to protect. The cattle grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun. The windmill turned steadily in the eternal wind, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear Rosa calling instructions to the new hands. Was Marcus telling the truth this time? Had prison finally taught him lessons that freedom never could? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure it mattered. What mattered was that the ranch was safe. Maria's legacy was secure. The future was protected from the past. I walked back down the hill toward the house, where Hank was waiting with the evening reports. Rosa had prepared my favorite dinner, and the young hands were gathering around the bunkhouse for their nightly card game, the same traditions Maria had fostered for 30 years. The phone rang as I reached the porch. Another ranching family, this one in Montana, asking for advice about protecting their assets from predatory relatives. Word had spread about our experience, and now other families turned to us for guidance when they faced similar threats. Mrs. Rodriguez, the caller said, we heard about how you handled your situation. We're dealing with something similar, and we don't know who else to trust. I invited them to visit the ranch, to learn from our experience, to understand that protecting what you love sometimes requires harder choices than you ever imagined making. As the sun set over West Texas, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, I sat in Maria's rocking chair and thought about the woman who'd left me everything, not just money and land and cattle, but the wisdom to protect them. Maria had been right about stewardship versus appetite. She'd been right about love requiring boundaries. She'd been right about the difference between enabling and empowering. Most of all, she'd been right about me. I was stronger than I'd known, more capable than I'd believed, more worthy of respect than I'd ever imagined. The windmill at Widow's Gate caught the last light of evening, its blades turning with the patience of eternity. The wind kept its old promises, carrying the scent of grass and cattle and the endless possibility of tomorrow. I was 59 years old. My son was in prison. My sister was dead. My family was broken beyond repair. And I had never been more at peace with my life. Some stories end with reconciliation, with forgiveness, with families reunited and love triumphant. But some stories end with something more valuable, truth. The truth that love without boundaries isn't love at all. The truth that protecting someone from consequences isn't kindness, it's cruelty disguised as care. The truth that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to save someone from the life they've chosen. Marcus would serve his 18 years, and maybe, he would emerge as the man he'd promised to become. If that day came, I would be here, ready to meet him as an equal rather than as his victim. But if it didn't come, if prison failed to teach him what freedom never could, I would still be here, protecting what Maria built, honoring what she believed, living the life she'd made possible. The wind kept turning the blades at Widow's Gate, and I kept my promises to the dead and the living alike. Some hungers can never be satisfied, no matter how much you feed them. But some hungers can be starved into submission if you're strong enough to stop feeding them. I was strong enough. I was finally, truly, completely strong enough. If you enjoyed Priscilla's story of strength and boundaries, you'll find even more inspiration in our book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain. This powerful guide has helped thousands of women discover that it's never too late to start over, set boundaries, and create the life you deserve. Whether you're dealing with family drama, financial stress, or simply feeling stuck, this book will show you practical steps to reclaim your power and write your own triumphant ending. Click the link in the description to order your copy today and start writing the next chapter of your remarkable story. What did you think of Priscilla's journey? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and protecting yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of strength, survival, and triumph. Your story matters, and you're stronger than you know.